Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. I'm not going to waste any of your time today. I am going to go ahead and hop right into this liquid splash effect. A lot of you guys have been asking me about doing this type of effect where basically you have a product, like probably a can, some kind of liquid can, and then you have this liquid splash kind of coming from behind it. So there's a lot of ways that you can do this. The way that I did it here is I basically set up a simple fluid simulation where we have the fluid coming from behind the product and then it kind of just splashes around the product. So let's go ahead and set this scene up from scratch. This was my testing. I'm going to go ahead and play this back so you can see kind of what this is going to look like. Now this is a low resolution simulation here, and as you can see it actually goes all the way to frame 100 here, and it kind of gets a little wild. We're going to go ahead and control this a little bit better in our new simulation, and I'm going to show you guys exactly how you would set something like this up so that you can use it for your product renders or something to impress a client. All right, File, New, General. Go ahead and save this one, and I'm just going to save this one to my desktop for now as Can Splash. And this will be available on my Patreon, so the full completed file, you'll have to rebake it, will be available. Let's go ahead and delete the light. Delete the cube. I'm going to add in a mesh cylinder, and this will just act as our can. I'm going to scale it a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead, Object, Apply Scale. I'm actually going to add a cube back in, Object, Quick Effects, Quick Liquid. So now as you guys can see, we have a little liquid simulation here. It's not reacting to anything yet. The very first thing I'm going to do is set up a cache folder. So I'm going to click on my domain, which is this larger box here. I'm going to go over to my domain settings, scroll down to where it says cache, and I'm just going to go to the desktop, make a new folder, and call it cache liquid. Open that up, click accept. For now, we're going to run this to frame 100, so make your end frame 100 and then switch the type to all, and that's going to allow us to continuously rebake this. Now just go ahead and scale your domain up a lot. I'm going to scale it kind of wide like this, a little bit bigger than everything else that we're dealing with. Now let's go ahead and take this cube right here. This is our actual liquid here. So I'm going to go ahead and move it along the x-axis like that. So as you guys can see, we have our cube of liquid and then we have our can. I'm going to scale the can up a bit and move it right behind or right in front of our liquid object. So now go ahead and click on your liquid object, and you're going to have some settings on the right hand side here. You'll have liquid geometry. That's all good to go. And then you want to check mark initial velocity, which is going to allow us to basically push this thing any direction we want. So in our case, we want to push it along the x-axis, 10 for the x-axis. So just go ahead and type 10 meters a second there. And then we're going to go to our scene settings here and turn off the gravity. Another thing we're going to do is click on our domain. Make sure you're saving this as you go, by the way. Go to your domain, scroll all the way down to where it says field weights, and then you're also going to turn the gravity all the way to 0 over here as well. For this simulation, we'll just start off with 50 resolution divisions, and then you want to go ahead and also check mark mesh, which should be under liquid. Yep, go ahead and check mark mesh right there. I'm going to collapse everything so we can easily bake and rebake this. Let's go ahead and just bake this and just see what we get. Go ahead and bake. It's baking out to frame 100. All right, now as you guys can see, we have our liquid. But guys, it's not interacting with our cylinder. Why is that? Because we have to set up our cylinder to actually react with the liquid. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Free All. Go ahead and click on our cylinder, and this is, of course, our product. Click on Fluid, and then instead of Fluid Flow, we're actually going to click on Effector. Okay, guys, and what that's going to do is basically make this liquid interact with our object. And now for the surface thickness, I'm going to start this out at 0.5 and just see how that looks. The surface thickness is basically where the water will touch the surface. So sometimes you're going to have to play with that setting to get it correct. So with all that enabled, let's go ahead and click back on our domain, click on Bake All, and let's go ahead and see what kind of result we have now. All right, let's go ahead and play this back. Now we have something here, guys. So as you guys can see, if we go to solid view and we play this back, we actually have a liquid interacting with our cylinder here, which is fantastic. Now, this is a very low resolution liquid simulation, which is totally fine. And if this is what you're looking for, you're done. But I want to kind of add a little bit more to this. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and click on Free All and go back to my wireframe view so I can see everything. Go ahead to Add Force Field, and then we're going to add in a turbulence force field. I'm going to go ahead and scale that up so it's easier to see. And I'm just going to go to my side view and move it along the x-axis so it's kind of like in the center of this cylinder here. Strength, let's go ahead and turn that to maybe like 5. And then let's go ahead and rebake and see what we get here. Now, you're going to have to experiment with these values to get the desired result, but we should have a little bit of more sporadic movement with our liquid, and we do. And as you guys can see, again, this is low resolution, so we're going to go ahead and bump this up to 150 for our resolution divisions, and we'll go ahead and click on Bake All. And let's see how slow it's going now. So as you guys can see, it's going to take a little bit longer. But after this is done, I'll probably end up baking this at like 256 resolution divisions, which is a great quality to usually choose. You can go even higher if your computer can handle it. Some people's can't. As soon as this is done, what we're going to do next is we are actually going to add some materials and lighting and kind of set up our scene to make this look really cool. Obviously, the cylinder itself isn't really that awesome, so I might go ahead and just add a quick can model in there from Blender Kit. We'll go ahead and see what happens, but let's just go ahead and wait for this simulation to finish. Again, guys, any changes that you make to your simulation, you have to rebake. A lot of you guys have reached out to me, said, Kenny, there's an issue with my simulation, this or that. Just make sure your settings are correct, and make sure you're rebaking, and make sure you're in the correct mode. You might not be able to see things in certain modes, so just make sure you go ahead and take a look at those actual settings before you think something's wrong with your file. You have to rebake. If you move the cylinder or the domain or pretty much anything that has to do with the simulation, you have to rebake. I know it kind of sucks because nobody wants to wait that long. As you can see, I'm waiting pretty long just to get to frame 100. And at 30 frames a second, that's just a little bit over 3 seconds of animation. So it's really not much. And that's why you just have to be patient when it comes to creating these things, because it just takes a while. So that's why I like to test this with a lower resolution, because then you can kind of see results very quickly and get an idea of what they're going to look like when you bake them at a higher resolution. So as you guys can see, we are done here. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. I'm just going to go ahead and play this back for you guys. That looks awesome. So as you guys can see, it is hitting the ceiling here. So if you don't want it to hit the ceiling like that, you can just expand your domain so that it doesn't hit the walls of the domain. If I go all the way to frame 100, you'll see that this thing has just gone insanely crazy. We can try to control this by slowing down the time, but as you guys can see, it fills up the entire domain. That is because the domain isn't the correct size. We can scale it up even more. But as you guys can see, right about here, this point looks really, really nice. So I'll probably set up my camera and start adding some materials here. Again, you guys can play with all these settings. You can play with the size of the liquid, the turbulence, size of the can, everything else. This is pretty much how to set up this generic splash. Now, the only other thing I can think of that we could experiment with, I'm going to go ahead and click on Free All here, is the actual time scale. So right now the time scale is set to 1. I'm going to go ahead and put it at 0.5, and then I'm going to lower my resolution divisions to 100. I'm going to bake. Now again, we wouldn't normally bake at 100. I would bake at a much higher value, but I just want to show you guys what this time scale effect is actually going to do to the liquid simulation. So let's go ahead and wait for a second for that to be completed. It is almost done. All right, guys. Patience here. Again, you're going to have some patience here, especially if your computer can't handle this stuff normally. Be patient. It will be worth your time when it's all done. Let's go ahead and take a look now. Wow. Do you guys see what's happening now? It's still doing the same thing as before, but around frame 100, we don't have nearly as much liquid because the actual time scale of everything is completely different. So we have kind of like a slow motion splash effect here, which is really cool. And if you wanted it to be even different, I'll do one last bake. I promise, guys, the last one. Go ahead and click on your flow object, and instead of the initial velocity being 10, try like 20. And I'm also going to take my domain and just scale it way up like that. Awesome. Let's go ahead and actually just bake this one last time. None of the liquid should run into the walls anymore, unless it might run into the walls. I think the domain's big enough where it probably shouldn't reach the edge or the faces of the wall, I'm hoping. So again, we're going to have a slow motion water effect here, guys, and it's going to look really, really good. I'm really excited to see what this looks like. All right, let's go ahead and play it back. Let's go to solid mode. Boom. Okay, I'll be honest, I didn't expect it to look like that, and this is why we experiment with different values. Why don't we go ahead and rebake one last time? Sorry, guys. Again, I pretty much gave you all the info you need. If this is enough, you can, get out of the video now, but I just want to make sure all my settings are correct. I think I'm going to put this back down to 10 meters a second. I thought that looked better, I'm going to click on my domain, and I think for the time scale, I'm going to choose 0.75. Make it a little bit faster, and I'm going to bake it out to frame 120. Let's go ahead and click on Bake All, and this will be our final bake, and then I promise we're going to set up materials, lighting, camera, and we'll just throw a can in there just to see like what it might look like. Again, guys, this is just a cylinder. Sometimes what is best is you actually just make the cylinder the actual effector, and then you hide the cylinder, right? And then you place the can where the cylinder is. So it actually looks like the liquid is interacting with the physical product, but it's actually not. So it's kind of like a fake interaction. All right, this is not looking how I expected it, guys. This is very strange. What did I do wrong here? Oh, it's probably because our resolution is so low. Let's do 150, and I'll jump the time scale back up to 1. I'm not sure why it's acting like that, guys. Apologies. Last bake. I'll cut this part out so you guys don't have to wait for this. All right, guys, the bake is done. Let's go ahead and check out what we got. And again, you can copy all of my exact settings. This looks a lot better. I like this a lot. Now, when I actually end up rendering this, I'll probably go ahead and bump my resolution divisions up to like 300, maybe 400. Let's go ahead and actually apply some materials to this. Very first thing I'm going to do, as you probably guessed, go over to Cycles, GPU, and let's go ahead to Rendered View, and let's go ahead and add in an environment texture. I am going to locate my HDRI folder, and I am going to choose probably this one for now, and then we'll come back to this later. I'm going to go ahead and click on my cylinder. I'm just going to right-click, Shade Auto Smooth, give this a metallic shader with a low roughness, maybe a slightly less low roughness. There we go. Go back to solid view, click on my camera. I'm just going to completely center every aspect of my camera, and I'm going to bring it over on the x-axis, okay? And then I'm going to move it up 90 degrees on the x and 90 on the z. Let's go ahead and snap to the camera view. Go to rendered view. All right, cool. So far, so good. I'm going to back myself up a little bit more into the scene here. Now, if we go ahead and play this back, we have a nice liquid effect on our object. This is looking awesome so far. Now, of course, I'm going to bump up the resolution. One of the things I'm going to do for now, instead of actually dropping a can into this, I'm just going to take this. I'm going to add in a... Actually, I'm going to hide this cylinder. I'm going to add in a new cylinder. Add mesh cylinder. I'm just going to kind of place it generally where that was, probably about there or so. Scale it up on the z-axis, scale it up a bit more. Let's make sure we're scaling this properly. That's perfect. And I'm just kind of scaling it to the general size of the other cylinder. Now this one is going to be our can object. I'm going to give it the same shader, which I believe was this. Yep. And then as you guys can see, it kind of looks like crap. We're going to make it look a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead to our modifiers, give it a bevel modifier, give it a edge split modifier, and a subdivision surface modifier. For our bevel, I'm going to choose a few segments there. I'm also going to apply the scale of our object. That should fix the bevel. And then bump up these levels for the viewport and the render. And we'll just make those 3. Shade Auto Smooth. And already this is looking a lot better. Maybe a slightly more of a bevel there. That looks fantastic. And then I think I might just give this a slight color. Just kind of play around with some ideas here. Maybe something orange. That looks kind of nice. And then you can kind of mess with some of the other values here. See what you can come up with. That looks pretty good. Now for our water, I think I'm going to make this a little bit more blue. And then I'll eventually rebake this. Make sure you hide this initial cube. That is actually our fluid object flow. You don't want that in your render. This is looking good so far. I think now we're kind of ready to set up more, maybe some lighting, maybe a background plane. Let's go ahead and play around with some elements here. I just added a quick plane in here. I think I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees. Move it behind everything like this. Scale it up. That looks fine. And then I'm just going to give it like maybe a darker shader. And we're going to go ahead and play around with the roughness here. Metallic. Maybe even make this thing white. Bring it kind of close to our scene here. That looks good. Again, kind of just messing with some settings here, guys. Seeing what we can come up with. Looks pretty cool. Now, one thing you guys can do is you can just ever so slightly rotate it on the Y. Notice what we can get when you do that. Looks kind of cool. And then move it back on the X, of course. kind of interesting. You can kind of mess with the roughness a little bit more. Remember, we're just giving it just some slight rotation there. And then we're going to go ahead and narrow in on our actual scene here with the viewport display settings and just kind of see what this is going to look like. I'm just going to play it back. Looks pretty cool. Another thing we might want to do is actually animate the camera towards our object. So I'm going to click on the camera. I am going to insert a keyframe for the location. And then I'm going to move forward to like frame 60. And I think I'm going to just zoom my camera in on the x-axis a little bit like that. And I'm going to insert another keyframe. And now if we play this back, you'll notice we have our camera moving in towards our object and we have our liquid coming towards us. This looks really good. I am going to bake this at a higher resolution because I want to get more detail in this actual simulation. So I'm going to go ahead and click on our domain. As much as it pains me, guys, I am going to rebake. So I'm going to click on Free All. And then I'm going to go to wireframe mode so I can see everything. Click back on our cube, make sure we can see that. Everything looks good. Click on our domain, and then for the resolution divisions, I'm going to choose 400. And then I'm going to bake, and I'm going to come back when that is done baking. Alrighty, guys, we are back, and we have a 300 resolution division fluid simulation here. Let's go ahead and play it back and see what we get. Wow, look at that. So this is more what I was looking for here. So this is really interesting. So we have our turbulence affecting our fluid, and we also have this crazy splash effect that looks really, really good. And it looks pretty realistic, I think. Now, you could go even higher with this resolution, but for now, I'm going to go with this and probably end up posting this on Instagram. It looks pretty good. So as you guys can see, the liquid is completely hidden at first, which is pretty much what we want. And then we go ahead and play this back, and it just looks really good. Another thing I think I might do is add some more smoothness to the actual liquid itself and maybe some motion blur. Now don't forget to hide that cube back there. Everything is looking really good. Go into our render properties on the right here, and I'm going to check motion blur. And then for our samples, I'm going to do like 150. Denoising, we'll choose optics. And then let's go ahead into our light path settings, guys, which is going to be on the right hand side here. Let's zoom in on this glass shader, which is actually water. And I'm just going to bump everything up to 10. Look at what that just did to our glass. Let's go back. So this is with zero transmission. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Look at the clarity you can get when you bump up your light paths, guys. I just want to point that out because it is so important to achieving a quality render. This looks fantastic. And then go ahead and bump your total up to 50. And now we're rocking and rolling. Do not ever enable GI approximation. It absolutely destroys your render. Unless you like that look. If you like bad renders, go ahead, enable it. I'm going to go ahead and hide this image plane, and I'm actually going to go over to the shading tab, hop into my rendered view, click on world, and I'm just going to zoom out to see my nodes, and I'm just going to add in, you guessed it, texture coordinate node, and I'm going to add in a mapping node, if I can spell it for the life of me. There we go. Plug generated into the vector, vector into the vector, and now just go ahead and adjust your Z rotation until you find a nice background. I'm looking for something that's pretty blue, maybe with a little bit of sky. I kind of think that looks good. Let's go with that. Now, one of the things you can do with these liquid simulations that is going to completely bog down your computer is you can add a subdivision modifier. Now, when I do this, it might crash Blender. Usually you do this with much lower resolutions, but in our case, this is pretty high. So let's go ahead and see if this works. Add a subdivision modifier. Now this is going to take a quick second, and it may or may not crash Blender. And it looks like it's going to crash Blender. I've seen this done before, and it typically will work well. In this case, I'm just going to force quit Blender, and we'll just shade this smooth for now. If you guys wanted a higher quality simulation, you would just rebake it at a higher resolution. So I'm going to go ahead and force quit Blender. Rip. Guys, can we have a moment of silence for Blender? Wow, it really doesn't want to end the task. Okay, there we go. All right, let's go ahead and reopen up Blender, guys. Let's go back to our splash simulation, and let's just right-click on this and shade smooth. It should still look pretty decent. It's not perfect, guys. This is not Houdini, it's Blender. But again, you guys can get an even better result if you actually go ahead and raise the resolution. All right, so we're at 50 millimeters for our perspective camera. I'm going to bump that up to 85, and I'm also going to change the start point Actually, start point, we'll back it up a little bit more. Insert that keyframe, go to frame 60, back this up a lot, maybe like right there. So actually this time we're starting in the middle and we kind of back up as this liquid splashes over everything. And I just think this looks fantastic. Let's go ahead and try render one frame. Let's render like frame 30 or so and just see what this looks like and see how long it's going to take. It says it's going to take about, what, 15 seconds or so? It's almost done actually. It doesn't look terrible. We do have some motion blur over here, which looks fantastic. It was about a 9-second render. That looks really, really good. Guys, I'm really happy with this. Now at this point, I would probably call it on this. But I know you guys mentioned, I mentioned this earlier, in Blender Kit, we can type in can, right? Let's go ahead and give that a second. As you guys can see up here, we have this full library of cans. I think I might look at this Heineken beer can. Maybe click on that and just see if I can import that into my project. Let's just go ahead and see if that imported properly. And I think it did. Oh, there it is. So it's right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the actual empty there that's controlling that. Let's go ahead and see what this thing looks like. It doesn't look too bad at all. I'm going to rotate it a little bit too. It does look like the logo is slightly warped, but that's okay. I'm just going to scale it up, bring it down in our scene here. Maybe scale it down a little bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and replace this can with this can. I'm going to move it back on the x-axis. Whoa. Hold up. There we go. Like that. And what we can do is we can also add some rotation to this as well. Now, again, this is just something I found online. So I'm not sponsored by Heineken, guys. Sorry. But I am going to go ahead to frame 0. I'm going to give this some rotation. Ooh, why is that rotation point off? All right, this thing, I might just take this thing and, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and click on parent, clear parent and keep transform. Delete this empty. Set this origin to geometry. Now we should be able to rotate this almost perfectly. This geometry is completely off, isn't it? All right, that's fine. Let's go ahead to the proper frame. Make sure this thing is lined up correctly with our simulation. Looks pretty good. I'm making sure the edges don't touch too much. That looks fine. Again, guys, just lining it up the best I can here. Snap back to the camera, go to frame 0. And let's go ahead and give this thing some slight rotation. Insert the keyframe, go to frame 60. Actually, let's go to frame 120 since that is actually when the thing lasts until. Now, obviously, this thing gets way too crazy up here, so I actually might just end it at like 60. Yeah, obviously, guys, your turbulence is going to directly affect the way that everything looks, so just keep that in mind. Now, this is pretty much the completed animation here. Again, this is really basic. I didn't really get into the shading too much. I didn't get into the lighting too much, but this is kind of what you would get here with something like this. So I'm just trying to show you guys how you create these types of product animations. Again, you guys can add as many force fields as you want. You can add as many resolutions to your actual liquid as you want. You can adjust the liquid settings, the gravity, everything. So we have a simple zoom out shot here. The only thing left that I can think of, guys, is to add some depth of field to our camera. So let's go ahead and click on our camera, checkmark depth of field. Let's make our can the object that we want to enable depth of field. Let's go to a really low value like 0.1. And as you can see, that already adds such a better effect to our render. So if we go ahead and play this back, that looks awesome. You can really tell that we're really like honed in on this shot now. Now, the only other thing I could think of is to swap our HDRI. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one and just see what that looks like. Again, you guys can experiment with this as much as you want. You could do some kind of a mountain potentially. I mean, I have a lot of HDRIs here, but it all depends on kind of what effect you're looking for. You can see that with different HDRIs, you have a completely different effect and different lighting. So let's try this one. This one looks pretty good. I actually kind of like this one. Pretty cool. So I think I like that one. I think I'm just going to make this all the way up to frame 60 here. So we're just going to adjust our timeline down there. That looks good. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that. Let's go ahead and play this thing back a couple times, just see what we have. Looks awesome, guys. Now, this is about as detailed as I'm going to get with it for now. Again, the more resolution divisions you have, the better. I can only think of one more thing that we could do. Let's just go ahead and make this liquid a little bit green. That looks pretty cool. Obviously, guys, this is completely exaggerated. You would never see something like this, but it does look kind of cool. And then maybe we can add just one light source above our can. So let's go ahead and add in let's add in a light source. Let's add in an area light. Bring it above our can, scale it way up. Now let's just make the power 10,000. Now the reason I'm doing that is because I'm trying to get this exaggerated look to make sure I can see kind of where my light source is. And let's go ahead and bring this back down to 5,000. That looks good. Before, after, and let's just go ahead and play it back and see what it looks like. It looks a little bit too exaggerated. I think I'm going to move it on the X, potentially behind the can. Slightly, give it slight rim light. And then you can also adjust the rotation. Like you could adjust the Y. Like right now I'm adjusting the Y to kind of get different effects here. This looks kind of good. Let's go ahead and check this out. If the light's clipping a little bit, I'm just going to move the light up. Doesn't look terrible. And again, you guys can kind of experiment with this. I'm just trying to show you how you can add just very simple things to your render to achieve next level results. Guys, how long did it take to come up with this? What, like less than a half an hour realistically if you cut out the bake time? Pretty damn cool for a free program, right? And this is the Power Blender right here. Obviously, this Heineken can could probably use some work. The other thing is if you really zoom in, you'll notice the depth of field isn't really quite correct. And the reason for that is because it takes the center of the object as the center of the depth of field, I'm pretty sure. So I'm actually going to disable that, and we're going to manually put in the depth of field. So I'm just going to slowly slide this until I have it just about right. That looks pretty damn perfect to me. Cool, we'll go with that. You guys can also raise the f-stop so that you have a little bit more room to work with. Oh, another thing, we were on frame, 40 when we just defined that. Let's go to frame 1, and let's actually keyframe the f-stop and the, let's just keyframe the distance. Right now, the distance is about right here. I'm going to keyframe that, and then I'm going to jump to frame 60, and I'm going to adjust it to the can. That looks fantastic. Let's go ahead and take a look. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Now this looks fantastic, guys. I can't really think of anything else I would do with this. Maybe the last thing, I know I keep adding more things. Color management on the bottom right here. We could actually go in there and maybe just increase the exposure just a little bit. And then for the look, we can do like medium contrast, maybe like high contrast. Actually, let's do medium high contrast. I think that's pretty much perfect. What do you guys think? Is this something you guys enjoyed? I think we covered a lot here. Someone asked for this. There you go. You got it. Pretty damn simple to do. And I'm pretty happy with the result. So guys, that's pretty much it. I showed you guys how to do this, how to set this up. If you guys enjoyed this tutorial, please consider subscribing. Also, remember that if you do join my Patreon, guys, you can actually get access to all of my tutorial files, and you can kind of cheat the system. Just sign up for 1 month, download everything, and then you can cancel. That's totally fine. If you liked every tutorial up to date, I'm not gonna get mad if you do that. People have done it, and that's totally fine. You get access to every single one of my tutorial files, 25 bucks a month. Now, again, you can pay this one-time fee of $25, download all the tutorial files, and you have them. You would just have to rebake if you bought this. And I include HDRIs in there as well, which you can access from Polyhaven. All right, now this one is not uploaded yet, guys, so be patient. I do have to upload this and a few others that I missed, so I will be adding those very shortly to the drive. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this tutorial, subscribe, turn those notifications on. I will talk to you guys in the next tutorial.